Hi, this is Andrea. I'm an autism mum. If you're listening for the first time, I'm here to be the voice of my daughter, other parents, professionals, and neurodivergent individuals through our own lived experiences. I want to give visibility to these superstars that most of the time behind the scenes make a huge impact on neurodivergent lives. Welcome to the Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. Creating a podcast has always been one of my dreams, and I finally managed to accomplish it. And I feel like there were a few events in the past few months happening in my life that drove me to this stage of having created my own podcasts with the aim of celebrating difference, with the aim of raising awareness of the different types of neurodivergence, and ultimately promote acceptance within society, because there is a lot of stigma around it. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. One of these events has been my grandmother passing away earlier this year. She was an inspiration to me. It was from her I learned how to be generous with others and to do good to my friends, my family. She was always very empathetic and loving. She had an amazing way of creating her own relationships, and she taught me a whole lot. If she was here with us today, she would have turned 84. She lived 84 years of what we can say a good life. She raised 3 children, 5 grandchildren, and she got the chance to meet 2 great-grandchildren. She loved music and a good get-together of the whole family, because she would bring people together. And I miss her dearly. Today has been quite emotional. And I do want to dedicate this episode to her, and you will understand why. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. If you're following me on any of the social media channels, you might be aware that I am taking part in a research study initiated by Experimental Psychology and the Department of Psychiatry of the University of Oxford on Autism Character Strengths. This is a key research project that stands out as it can shape the way we support autistic children with a positive approach. The study aims to develop ways of identifying and supporting autistic young people to make use of their character strengths, and also to support their parents, caregivers, and teachers to help them in their daily lives. And today I had my first questionnaire interview, and the first question I was asked was, what do you think the strengths of your daughter are? And I'm still astonished that you might not believe this, that I could not answer the question immediately. I paused and I had to think, and all I could think about was the communication barriers that we have with her. But eventually, as we went through the questionnaire, thinking about examples, I could then think about my daughter's character strengths. However, with her speech and language delay always being a barrier to me thinking positively about her. And on my drive back home, I was just thinking, what the hell? How is it possible that you are trying to shift the mindset about neurodivergence and autism in particular when you cannot even think about the strengths of your daughter? Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. This made me get to the conclusion that these values that we have, that communication is all about speech, are still very much embedded within me. And that bothers me quite a lot, because communication doesn't necessarily need to be through speech and language. There are other ways of communicating. Her reaction to certain things like foods, for example, when she's sensitive to some of the textures, that's a form of communication. That's her telling me, Mommy, I don't like that food. Or a meltdown because we are going against her will. That's also a form of communication. It's not the most ideal form of communication, but she's still communicating that she's unhappy about something. And having a degree in communication and media, I should know this. I studied all the theory around linguistics and different forms of communication. But no, I still have this belief very much embedded within me. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. And this puzzles me. And it doesn't mean that my positive perspective about neurodivergence is not there. It is there. And I appreciate every single step of progress that my daughter makes. But again, this is because we tend to focus on what's negative about neurodivergence, even myself as a mother. And I'm pretty confident to say that other parents will feel in a very similar way. This is because of the way we are brought up as children, and then we get all of these beliefs within us, which is very, very sad. The positive thing is that if we acknowledge the way we feel about something, we can actually change it if we want to. And so I am committed to change this unconscious belief that I have about my daughter's way of communicating. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. She has so many strengths. She's honest. If she's not happy with something, you will clearly see it. She's loving, she's caring. She appreciates the beauty of things in life, like the nature, the sea, the flowers, the way that she loves to dress up. And she's always excited and enthusiastic about doing things that she loves, and even trying new things. She's quite curious and open to try different things. And every day I'm hopeful for a new word, but maybe I should be hopeful for something else. Because words are not the only way to communicate. And why am I relating all of this to my grandmother? Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. This is because when I was born, the doctors told my parents I was blind. And while my parents were at work, my grandmother used to look after me. These were devastating news to the whole family. But Grandma always had a sixth sense that would tell her that I could see. And at that point in time, I could not communicate as well because I was simply a baby. And Grandma used to play with me to try to understand if I could see or not. Until one day when I was 3 months old, and of course I know this story because she used to tell me this story. She was showing me a toy and she realized that I could see. They immediately take me to the doctors, and this was confirmed. Grandma never gave up on me. She was restless until she could prove that I could see. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. And she was the first one finding one of my strengths. Even though for a long time I had seen my really bad eyesight as a weakness of mine. Especially as I was growing up as a teenager. I had difficulties reading, I had difficulties looking at the board in school, but there was always a way of having me in the first table so that I was able to read properly to the board. But then it got worse when I got to secondary school, because then everyone is going through their teenager phase, and we know that some children can be a bit mean. So that was one of the reasons I developed low self-esteem that lasted for a long period of time in my life, because my eyes can do funny things which I don't even realize they do and that I cannot control. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. Although it might not be fair to compare my eyesight with the different types of neurodivergence, I still find a strong correlation between both of them, just because in both cases we cannot control our behaviors. So I cannot control what my eyes do and where they move. And for example, autistic individuals might not be able to control their behaviors. But this is not who defines us. As I grew older, I eventually accepted my eyes for the way they are. I even looked at potential surgery options, but since they were all aesthetical, and therefore I wouldn't put myself through an eye surgery just for an aesthetical reason. And if we think about it, this is all about acceptance, accepting ourselves for who we are, accepting our children for who they are, the way they communicate with us, the way they communicate and interact with others. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. And stay hopeful, because what we might see as a weakness at this point might actually be a strength instead. And most important, believe. If we believe, anything can happen. Like my grandma did. She believed that I could see. And she was right. So thank you, Grandma, for believing. And I know wherever you are looking after me and our beautiful melody. I know you're shining your light on me, and that's why I feel so empowered to reach for my dreams, like creating the Neurodiverse Voices podcast. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. The key takeaways from today's episode are: in every weakness, there's always a strength. And I know you can find the strength in your child. Stay hopeful and believe, like I do believe in the good things coming. Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. Thank you for listening to this episode of the Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference. Today, in memory of my beautiful grandmother, who is now another star in the sky and who I miss dearly. This episode was recorded on the 23rd of May of 2024. Stay tuned for the next episode of the Neurodiverse Voices podcast, celebrating difference, in a couple of weeks. As usual, I look forward to having you on that side. I'll see you soon.